Now, hello everyone, and welcome to the March event of Sisters in Crime Australia, brought to you through the miracles of Zoom and YouTube. Our topic is toxic families. I'm Robyn Walton, and I have three guests, all authors, and they are in alphabetical order: Nicola Moriarty, Erina, Reddan, and Yeowart. Welcome to all of you. We're going to be talking for around 35 minutes on the topic of three new books by these authors. Specifically, since our organisation is to do with crime, we're going to very happily look at the crimes in these books, or the misdemeanours, or the tendencies to crime, anything along that line, and also the phenomenon of revenge or retaliation. I will add in a trigger warning because abuse is a part of each of the storylines. There is child abuse, or there may be spousal abuse. So please use your discretion in that respect. We won't dwell on details, of course, in our conversation, but it is a factor in each of the books. Now, we'll start, as we always do, with an Indigenous welcome. We acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia. We recognise our continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to invite the panellists to introduce themselves in their own words and show you their book covers. So we'll start again alphabetically. We're going with Nicola first.
Hello, everybody. I am Nicola Moriarty. I am the most recently, or about to be, author of this book here, You Need to Know. Prior to that, I've written Free Falling, Paper Chains, The Fifth Letter, Those Other Women, and The X. I've been published in Australia, the UK, America, and translated into a few different languages. And I've loved writing and reading and books in general forever. So that's me.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Erina?
Well, I'm Erina Reddan, as you know. This is my book, my latest literary suspense book, which I write for adults, The Serpent Skin. I also do young adult action thrillers. I have just finished a PhD in young adult literature, and it's called Blood and Ball Gowns, looking at girl warriors and how they're kind of really co-opted back by having to twirl in ball gowns. I came to writing from journalism, and I used to be a foreign correspondent at the ABC, won a Walkley Award, and we do love all dogs and cats on this Zoom.
Program.
And it's
Sorry.
it's really great to be here with everyone. Yeah. Talking about this, the books that we're discussing tonight are very powerful, and they're all really compelling, and I'm really looking forward to getting my teeth in.
And I must add that that texture on the front of your book is lovely. It's got a snaky skin texture for those who find it in a bricks and mortar bookstore and want to have a look. Now we go to Lynn.
Hi, I'm Yeowart, and I have written The Silent Listener. This is my debut novel. It's a psychological thriller and deals with, yes, toxic families. Apart from this writing, I am a consulting writer and editor, so I work with all kinds of people, including corporates, governments, not-for-profits, writers, artists, pretty much writing and editing anything that they need written or edited. I've also taught creative writing, got a couple of postgrad quals in creative writing, and like Nicola, am totally obsessed with words, reading, writing, books, anything to do with any of the above.
Don't leave me out.
Me too. Sorry, Erina. Okay, I'm jealous of Erina's cover.
Okay.
I actually put a snake on my cover, and it would have been brilliant if
it would have been, yeah.
The texture that Erina's has, but
yours has it too. Yours has that beautiful embossing as well.
It has a little bit. Yours, I think yours is nicer, more effective. But
it's not me. It's my publisher. They did a beautiful job. Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Now to our conversation. I do want to note at the outset that we're all aware of the diversity of families and households, but in this particular case, our books under discussion are about small traditional households. That's typically a married couple, mother and father, and the several children. So that's what we'll be talking about. Now, I'm going to ask first for each of the authors to tell us a little bit about the family they're focusing on, just so we're oriented. So we'll start again with Nicola.
Sure. So in my novel, it's an extended family. So we do have the one family where it is that traditional mum, dad, and they have 4 children. And then on top of that, we've got grandma, we've got brother and his wife who don't have any children, and then also single brother. So big extended family that we're dealing with. And they seem like your happy, normal, everyday family with, you know, just your normal issues, but there is a lot of darkness in their past and some things simmering under the surface for them.
And they're living in Sydney?
Yes, living in Sydney, sort of North Shore is where I think I've placed them. And yeah, that placed in the middle class, I guess I would say, and probably similar kind of upbringing to myself in that sense of, you know, types of schools that they're going to, and also modern day family as well, I should say. However, pre-COVID, because I
yes.
wrote the majority of the book pre-COVID, and when all that hit and I was editing, I just thought, I don't think I can bring them into a COVID world. So even though it's coming out in very much in a well into a COVID world, it's it's kind of, I guess, set about a year ago.
Right, thank you very much. Yeah. Now, Erina, your family?
In the Serpent Skin, I'm really looking at a very traditional family because I wanted to take a forensic look at the power imbalances inside a nuclear family and what that can lead to. It's kind of one of those epic families that cleave together because they must. That's the only way they can survive. It's a very poor rural family, farming family. They all are in the project of doing the work that it takes every day to just make it through the day. It's set in a very tight-knit Catholic community, actually. So I'm really looking at the kind of world that I grew up in. I really say it's my world, but not my story. Like it's the Serpent Skin is kind of like a love song to the women that I saw growing up. My own mother was so ill after 8 pregnancies that on her 8th child, well, the 6th child that became a child, she was so ill that she couldn't look after her babies. So another woman across the creek stepped in and took that newborn. She had 2 children of her own, and she took a newborn for 6 weeks. Mm. Another woman with 6 children took me at 11 months for 6 months. I just think that incredible ability of those women to just create something that meant they could breathe for each other really is a very rarely told story in Australia, and I really wanted to look at that kind of family supported by a community.
That's great, thank you. Oh, and what time era are you talking?
Very good point, Robyn. It's set in 2 time eras. One is the late 1960s. It's told by a 10-year-old, very feisty little kid whose mother disappears one day, and then her father tells a whole stack of lies about it. She can't really work out why her father is lying about it. But in the end, she has to shut up because her only survival is with her lying father and not her disappeared mother. But 14 years later, she's a young adult, and she is able to, she falls across a clue that says there's something wrong, something very dark in the family that I grew up in, and nothing will stop at this time. So that's why it's told in those 2 time frames. And it's told backwards. It's told in a time frame where we can see the power imbalances so clearly, so that we can reflect on our own and see what have we normalized in our own time that is also really weird, but we just accept.
Do you mind if I jump in to say how much I loved JJ's voice in your book, Erina? Her voice as a child, and then the way it translated into her voice 10 or 14 years later. Sorry, 14 years. Yeah, 14 years later. She still had, there's like a very specific way that she spoke to the reader that was still there, but you could tell she'd grown up. And there was just something about the way you wrote her. I just loved it. Just wanted to mention that.
Thank you so much. And I think we all work very hard on making the authenticity of the stories congruent as the characters grow, because all our characters grow. Yeah.
Yeah, she's a distinctive child, isn't she? She stayed in my mind, yes.
Yeah, she's very gritty. She's very gritty, and she's a child that is quite raw in the world, and that's why she needed her mother. Her mother was like a skin for her. So when the mother disappears, she loses the skin, and she's very layered open to the world, which is where it all starts. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and Lynn, your family.
Before I do that, I might just add from what Nicola said that I also absolutely loved the language in The Serpent Skin, particularly the early JJ era. The language was absolutely beautiful, and I think on about page 1, maybe page 2, I got out a highlighter and I thought, I'm going to highlight all of these beautiful words and the beautiful language. And then I had to jump up after a few more pages and email Erina and say what I'm doing. And any minute my highlighter is going to run out. Beautiful phrases. The language I just think is superb. So I really admired that. So on to The Silent Listener. The Silent Listener and The Serpent Skin, Erina and I have mentioned this to each other, have a lot of similarities. So my protagonist, Joy, is 11 years old when we first meet her, and she also lives in a house on a dairy farm in the country where everyone is poor and very much at the mercy of the weather and the prices they get for their milk from the local butter factory, and I guess sort of government policies. And so they're struggling against all of that, particularly Joy's family. And so that's set also in the 60s, a little bit like Erina's. And then I have, very similar again, Joy coming back as an adult, trying to work out some of the secrets and lies, and also omissions that sort of envelop her family. And I also have another time thread which begins in the 1940s during World War II, which just helps map what happened to Joy's parents when they met and moved to the farm, and the, I guess, gradual disintegration of their relationship and any chance they have of being happy.
Yeah, we might pick up there on what Lynn said, because the fathers are very troubled souls in the books by Erina and Lynn. So I wanted to ask those two authors specifically further about that. Could you tell us about what's perhaps motivating or what's troubling the man? I'll start with Lynn because she does give us a few clues, I think.
So in The Silent Listener, the father, George Henderson, is a very fervent religious man to the point of being pious. It's not a Catholic family, they're actually a Protestant family. And I think that Australia's literature doesn't delve very much into Protestant families. That sort of Catholic, Irish Catholic background seems to be a bit more prevalent. So I was quite interested in exploring Protestant family, and that's where I'm from. So there are a lot of things in The Silent Listener that are direct lifts from my family and the house and the farm that I grew up in, right down to things like the wall hanging in the kitchen, people who've read it, the dams, the water lilies, the eels that we ate, lots and lots of things. But what's motivating the father is definitely his religious fervour. He is very keen, to put it mildly, that his children will go to heaven, and therefore they must be, in his eyes, perfect in this world. And in fact, at one point he tells the children, and I might say my father told this to us, that he would be the only unhappy person in heaven because his children would be in hell. So we kind of grew up with that sort of thing hanging over us. So I was very keen to explore what that would mean for young children in a typical nuclear family, and then also what that would mean many years later when people wanted to solve some questions and, as Robyn touched on before too, maybe seek some revenge and right some wrongs.
Yes, I Googled a little about the words such as discipline and family and fatherhood and so on, and I mostly came up with the Southern American Protestants, of course, of today, who are very strongly maintaining that line. I don't know how much it's strongly held to in Australia, but do you have any clues?
I think there are definitely pockets. not necessarily confined to rural areas either. But certainly where I grew up, it wasn't, we did have Catholics there and other religions, I guess, although to be perfectly honest, maybe not. I think probably just Protestants and Catholics. And there were a lot of people who were very fervent, and I think I could say I still know people who are very fervent. And that's fine to be fervent about your religion. I think the difficulty that at least George had in The Silent Listener, and maybe some people have in real life, certainly my father did, was that they didn't know how to live the principles that they expounded. They just wanted to, well, in my father's case and in George's case, literally belt them into their children, never realising that on one level the double standards behind purporting to live by this Bible that says love everybody and so on. And the flip side of it was that we ruled our house, and George rules his house with fear of both punishment on earth and punishment in the afterlife.
You know,
Yes.
I think it's chilling and powerful, the dynamics in your family. And my heart went out to the children in that family. The way they tried to support each other, but they were really kind of separated by fear and their need to be obedient. It was just, you tell so much.
Well, that's it was interesting what you said before, actually, too, about it, and I really enjoyed this in The Serpent Skin, that the family stuck together, and they stuck together in order to overcome their obstacles. And you're right, that in a sense, like the family in The Silent Listener, they fall apart in order to each of them survive. So I thought that was a really interesting, the difference in how we explored the ramifications of what was going on in both of those families.
Yeah, it's nice to get, sorry, I'll just say it's nice to get the two different ways that it can go, because it's so true that it can go one way or the other. And also I loved back in the 1940s, so how kind of insidious it is that you discover what he's like, or you know, because you're reading the other sections and you know what he's going to turn out like, but you're seeing him as this dashing, handsome gentleman, and that slow realization of who he is. Like you said, Erina, just so chilling, and that kind of
I'm going to say it is chilling, but it's so readable. Every page, it didn't burden me with its powerfulness. It actually deepened my experience of being with that family. Really, it was enriching. And I think that the difference between the kind of family that falls apart and the one that cleaves together, partly it's a tribal thing. Irish Catholics, you are always a Catholic. But I also felt it was partly the premise of each of the books, because in yours it's very clear from page one we're dealing with a monster, a psychopath, really, but a very kind of normalized psychopath. I mean, apparently there's 20% of our society are psychopaths. So it's a very good portrait. In mine, it's more like a flawed man who's empowered by a really, deeply flawed institution, and it's or institutions, patriarchy, but dialed to the max by the Catholic Church. So it becomes this kind of guerrilla warfare between a JJ as a 10-year-old and later older, and this chess game between the two, how they kind of try and outdo each other and maneuver and find out what the other one is up to. However, there are so many times in which they reach through that to try and touch the humanity of each other with love and compassion. But again, then they're torn asunder again because of this mystery of what happened to the mother. And I think it's that as well. The father has a softness. He has a love for his children, but because he's so flawed, that his need to be a big man in the church is more important than his love for his children. And that is because, for the very same reason that I see in your father, Lynn, that he has been empowered to be the head of the family. It's his responsibility that his wife and his children don't end up in hell. And in my world, and certainly this is where the real meets the fictional, my father really believed in a visceral idea of hell. And he believed that he was responsible for my mother. Actually, my real mother left him finally and remarried. And he believed that he was then responsible. He hadn't loved her enough and she would be in hell. And it was on him. So it's that kind of level of a real serious and genuine commitment to responsibility that women belong to men, that women come from Eve's rib, women are ribbed from Adam's body, and therefore they are also, the corollary of that is that they're to serve men. That's their job. And the problem with that is that it was so kind of accepted. The women and the men all, it was a shared understanding. And that's why I really love those women, because they saw it and they knew intuitively it can't be right. So they did all this kind of covert action to support each other. But I actually think it comes down to, it's not about the church, it's about patriarchy as it is institutionalized in many different institutions, but we've happened to choose the church.
Yes.
And in the Catholic Church, that's particularly relevant or effective because you've got God, the Pope, the priest, the Father. So women, children just don't even fit into that. They're there to be managed and manipulated and for the women to serve them. It's the kind of world that we are still living in today, but we don't see it as much because it hasn't gone on. But it's still the moment. It's still incumbent on all of us, women, men, all of us, to keep shining a light and finding a way to balance the power.
May I also go to Nicola then for a slightly different angle on that, because she's talking about the current life, but mothers and daughters, you have quite a number of pairs of those in your book. What can you say?
I guess I tried in my book to explore the different types of motherhood. And I'll just mention, by the way, Erina, I loved how passionate you were about that just now. You could hear the passion in your voice talking about that, about the patriarchy and things like that. So it's lovely to hear you speak about it. But yeah, as you said, my book being set more modern day, and so very different issues to the ones that the families in the other books are facing. And yes, I tried to take a lot of different looks at the different types of choices you can make as a mother, and in particular the different types of guilt you feel as a mother. So whether that's guilt for, am I raising my children the right way? Am I doing anything wrong? So we've got a teenage daughter who is a bit troubled, but this mother she's got the teenage daughter, she's got younger daughter, and then she's also got twin babies. So she's trying to hold everything together, and she knows that there's something not right, and she wants to help her teenage daughter, but she's, also trying to give her that privacy, and so not sure if she can get through to her and if it's just normal teenage stuff. And yeah, so there's that guilt of, have I let something slip because I'm over here looking at these children? And then I've got another woman who has decided not to have children, but is suddenly starting to wonder, have I made the right choice? Should I reconsider this? Did my partner and I really discuss it properly? And am I about to leave it too late? And so there's the guilt around that as well. The guilt of, is it wrong for me to go to my partner and suddenly say, I've changed my mind once you've made a decision as well? And then I have the matriarch of the family, who I have to be careful that I don't give away anything about the book, but she's got these 3 sons. And there's maybe some little signs that she's ignored over the years about one of her children that, again, it feeds into that motherhood guilt. And also how far you go for your children, how far you go to protect your children, how far should you go to protect your children?
Yes.
It's really fascinating to track the time zones in our books, because yours is the most contemporary, Nicola. And that means that your women actually have more capacity to affect Whereas, you know, my mother's gone and your mother, Lynn, is ineffectual, has been rendered completely powerless.
Yes.
So it's really beautiful to see that the conversation and how it's tracked over the decades, because your women are pretty powerful in what they choose to do, and they're kind of wolf, like, that's not very good, is it? But they're like, you know, their mother instincts to do what it takes. I think it's really, it really feeds and fuels and nourishes your book. It's great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Having the three sons and their various relationships, and then the matriarch, Jill, I think that that provided, as for you as a writer, a lot of scope to explore different types of relationships between mothers' sons, mothers' daughters, mothers' babies, and the parents' relationships, the adult relationships. And I really think you did that beautifully. I just got totally pulled in, and chopping and changing between the different people's PO points of view, I thought was absolutely sensational. And then have to be careful I don't do any spoilers, but the backlash, or no, it wasn't actually backlash, sorry. I can't talk about it without giving too much away, but just I think the structure of your story, and with Erina's as well, but very tight and from a writer's point of view, absolutely beautifully and cleverly constructed, so that we see all these different relationships and different points of view and different times, and it just builds and builds and builds until inevitably there's a climax of some kind. I just thought it was, in both cases, absolutely beautifully and expertly crafted. So I admired that greatly.
And I'm just going to jump in, and also there's a lot going on in that book. You have a lot of relationships.
Yes, that's true.
You never feel it as a reader. Every page is pulling you on to the next page. So the reader, you hold the reader in a very beautiful space. It's great.
Thank you.
Wow. Thank you.
Well, I just complimented each of you on your books. I loved the construction, the crafting. I thought they'd been worked over very carefully. Now I was going to move on to what's always the most important topic on crime, Sisters in Crime panels, which is crime in the books or suggestions of crime. I think we'll go to Lynn first, possibly, because she even has a detective in there. She has quite a lot going on. So do you want to talk a little about what happens?
Yeah, that's funny that you mentioned the detective, because he was never meant to be there with my first early planning of the novel. But he popped up one day and I thought, this is interesting. I'll see where he goes and where he takes me. And I really enjoyed writing him, and also his sort of sidekick, the doctor who helps him.
Oh, that's right, yes.
They solve the crime, but that's perhaps open to speculation. There are certainly crimes in The Silent Listener, and they're all wrapped up with secrets and lies, and also I have introduced this concept of not telling, that sort of tradition that becomes sort of an ongoing thing, where people just don't talk about things, from an accident that happened many years ago to lots and lots of things. So there are, I'm going to say, 3 deaths that need to be explained, whether they're crimes or not. I'll just let readers decide as they read through it. And there is certainly some domestic violence and family trauma. And again, whether that falls into the category of crime is sort of really interesting, that thing that certainly back in those days, in the 60s, not so that people don't still believe this is the case, but that idea of punishing children and using corporal punishment.
Yes.
And I think psychological punishment. And
oh, yes, there's a lot in your room, isn't there? That room. Yes.
Sorry. I think that you know, there are some things that in today's society would be reportable. Doctors and so on would need to report, but in the 60s, in the Silent Listener, they were not reportable deeds. And so whether they're crimes or not, I think it's a really interesting take, but there are certainly, mysterious deaths, unexplained deaths, and a whole series of lies, secrets, and things that are not spoken about. And certainly in the house that I grew up in, we did not talk about things. It was all anything that wasn't exactly as it should be was hidden and never spoken about. So I think I have a lot of that and that sort of thing. And then there is the whole process of Ruth and Joy, the two sisters, starting to take revenge on their father, which once people work out what happens, there is potential, I guess, for discussion of whether that's the right thing to do or not. And when I was reading Nicola's book, I was thinking that there's something very similar taking place in her book. So I really enjoyed coming across that parallel too.
So did I. And you have a missing girl, of course. That's part leads to a death, but yes. So you
missing, so
yeah, you give us quite a lot of suspense. In other words, there are quite a few things to be uncovered or solved or delved into. They're literally or psychologically. Yes, yeah. Okay. What about Nicola at the other end? You can't say much about crime in yours, can you?
I know. I was just thinking that the biggest sort of crime in my book is too much of a spoiler, but I guess I can sort of refer at least to the car accident, because the whole book opens with a major car accident on the freeway, and then it's the mystery of how it happened, who caused the accident, who's going to survive the accident, was it an accident, you know, all of that kind of thing. And I guess there's this slow unraveling of all the different possibilities of how it could have been caused, because of everything that's going on in these people's lives, including, you know, a mother who I talked before about, this mother who's got these 4 children, and she does turn to the odd drink in order to cope. And so there's the question of, was she drinking on that day? Was she the one who caused the accident? There's the sister who, the sister-in-law who has been spending a bit too much time getting involved with her neighbour's daughter, trying to help out, but is she getting too involved? Is she overstepping and taking things too far? So there's all this possibility of crime, but as you say, the main climax of crime,
we won't
I
talk
cannot
about.
say.
No.
Yes.
It's quite intricately worked out, and it would certainly be cinematic too, that climax of yours.
Thank you.
Okay. And Erina, criminality or tinges thereof?
I'm very interested in the subtlety of what, you know, there is a missing body, and we do need to figure out what happened to the disappeared mother. So there's lots of twists and turns and red herrings and things that you think it's going to lead in that direction, but it's a dead end. And so it has all of those aspects of crime. But really, what I really love in the kind of crime work that I'm trying to do is that the crime you think it is not the crime it turns out to be. And actually, I'm very interested in the way that all these little things that we normalize, the power imbalances between people and the way we other people, all of that doesn't look like a crime, but it creates the conditions that lead to crimes. So the sexual harassment that we see, the arm around the back, the gently guiding, the please go forward so I can oogle you from the back, the comments, constant comments about a way a woman looks, because it references that her greatest value is in how she presents to the vision or the view of a man. All of that builds up to the kind of things that we're now seeing in Australia at the moment, where we're getting in Canberra, but not just in our Parliament House, but allegations of rape, allegations of sexual harassment, all, you know, crude and lewd sexual acts on female MPs' desks, real little boy stuff. All of that is empowered by the everydayness of the things that you wouldn't say are crimes. But I actually think one leads to another, and we've got to see that connection.
There's a certain frustration that we read your narrative set back in the 40s and the 60s, and then we see the trajectory through to now, where women are a great deal more free and empowered, yet are still troubled so much by these patterns of behaviour, shall I say.
I think we're in a very important moment in Australia, and it's been fueled by the moment around the world, the Me Too movement, and in fact the Black Lives Matter movement. All our lives matter, and we're beginning to see that things that we did accept as normal are not normal, and it is empowering people like people here and people who are, you know, sharing in this conversation. We can now say, actually, we don't like that, so we can start to push back. So even though some people would say there hasn't been a lot of movement, I see a lot of movement. There has been a lot of movement, but not enough. I was asked at my book launch the other day by a young man who's part of my extended family, how long do you think it will take? What's your time frame? It was basically asking us to wait for fairness, wait for equality. And I said, now. What more time do we need to wait? Now is the moment.
I think it's really interesting too, maybe just sort of getting back, because I agree entirely with everything that Erina has said. And I think it's interesting that we've all chosen to write fiction to portray some of these imbalances. And in one of my other interviews, I was asked why I chose fiction, why I wasn't writing maybe essays or articles or something like that about this sort of imbalance of power and the ramifications that that imbalance of power can create either in the moment, in the short term and in the long term. And I think there's something very powerful about writing fiction, and as women writing fiction about these imbalances of power, to shine a spotlight on them and say, this is why it's not good. It wasn't good historically, it's not good now, like in Nicola's story, and it's not good obviously in the world, but sometimes it's easier to present it in fiction and to let people empathise with characters rather than just presenting it as an essay or an article. And that was one of the reasons I was very keen to write fiction. And I maybe don't know how Nicola and Erina feel about that, but I think there is a great opportunity for fiction writers to bring to the fore very important issues without having to sort of proselytise or stuff things down.
No, you don't. I think we could close on that moment because it's just right, I think. Yes, thank you very much. But do you want to say anything more, Erina?
I just want to add to this because
yes.
What we do is incredibly powerful. It tells the stories so that people can hear it. And we do. Our brains are wired for metaphor. They're wired for stories. I'm not taking away from the beautiful, great journalism that's going on at the moment by great women journalists, by the statistics. They tell a story. But people really can enter into the kind of the deep richness of it and the possibilities that this kind of conversation can open up because of the work that people like us are doing.
Yeah. Nicola, would you like the last word on that? Fiction versus factual writing or blogging or any of the other ways you could express your opinions?
I couldn't choose between them. Obviously, I love to write fiction, but as Erina said, there's plenty of power in the non-fiction, in journalists' work, in blogging, all that kind of thing. I just love writing in general, so I think all of it has the capacity to influence the world. Yes.
Thank you. I'll thank all of you for talking about your book so freely. I'm sure our audience would thank you very much too. We have to hang around for 1 or 2 more minutes. We have some books to give away, as you would expect. We have some lucky drawing to do of lucky numbers for people who've registered. I'm going to ask Nicola to nominate a number between 1 and 44.
Number 33, please.
Okay, and that would be Helene Young. So she's a winner of a big stack of books, including books by each of our authors. Congratulations, Helene. Now we need one from Erina.
Like a barrel girl, which is rather ironic in this conversation.
15?
Number 16.
Beg your pardon, yes. Jennifer Morris. Congratulations, Jennifer. Hey, and Lynn.
Number 27, please, Robyn.
Pat Miller. Good. That's excellent. Now, it's my great pleasure just to wind this up with a few thoughts. If you like to go to bookshops online or in person, Sun Bookshop is greatly admired by Sisters in Crime because they're good supporters of us and vice versa. So you're getting some thumbs up there from someone who lives in Sunbury, which isn't so far from them, right? If you like to hang around YouTube, you can see more of these panels. We did them all through last year when the COVID came on and early this year. And you can also find what we call the Murder Mondays. They're one-on-one interviews with particular authors, individuals, including overseas authors, and some big names there. So that's really good. And if you are a member of Sisters in Crime, which is open to men and women, you can then join in for all sorts of activities and get the regular mail outs and information on books that are coming through and other events, because we don't only support books, of course, we're also interested in crime writing for screen, podcasts and so on. So I'll wrap it up at that point. Thank you very much to all three of our authors.
Thank you.
Good night. Yes. Thank you, Nicola, Erina and Jean. Good night.